Hello, I'm Rachel from Dwensa Garden in Ireland, and you are very welcome to this June garden tour video. It's been a little while since I made a garden tour, so I'm sure you're as excited as I am to see what is in flower in the garden. I was away for a week and a half, and upon my return the irises were just jumping out at me with all their beautiful, gorgeous colour. And then there were the peonies just bouncing around in a sea of white fluffiness. So I was very excited to take out the camera and walk around and just share with you the beauty that is June. June is a wonderful, wonderful month in the garden when many flowers really get going and we really feel that summer is truly here. So come with me, and please excuse a bit of scruffiness at the edges of the borders. I haven't had a chance to neaten them up, but never mind that. It's the flowers we want to see, and the flowers are looking fantastic. So good morning, and you are very welcome to this video. And as we pan past the weeping birch tree, one of the first things that greeted me on my return was the peonies in flower, and that clump over there with their white fruffiness is just beckoning. So that's where we're going to head now. And here we are, a bit closer to the peonies, and you can see what absolute beauties they are and giving such a wonderful display this year. We've, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 flowers fully open and several more to come, so it's a good result. The flowers are amazing from up close, so big and double and just quite glorious. Now this one is a no ID that I bought a very long time ago, and one of the things I love about it is the little flecks of pink that appear in the petals. It's a very nice feature that I love in all peonies, and I love the doubles as well. Really mad about the doubles. And the peony is flanked by this blue iris, which was the first thing to greet me when I came home. There are much more of them somewhere else in the garden, which I'll show you as we work our way around. So leaving behind the peonies, you can see that this little rhododendron has it's just wrapping up flowering. But over here we have something a bit more interesting. And if we look down at the base here, you can see that this year I managed to get a hoop in here around the flowers just before the top got too big to get the hoop in. So I was lucky, because this is a plant that really does need support, but I love, love, love the flowers. Look at that. I suppose the flowers are almost like a pelargonium, really, really enormous. A really big pelargonium, let's just say. It flowers at this time of year just once a year, but it's really gorgeous, and it keeps going for a long time. And now I'm just giving you a bit of a kind of a broader view. Up above the azalea, the rhododendron that is in flower, were other rhododendrons that flowered very well and have finished now. And down to the left is where I had my hyacinths earlier on. And in there I've planted a number of primroses since that point in time. And over here, just with the oleander tree, you can see a couple more irises that I divided last year. Now this is one of my favourites because it's unusual, and I divided it last year, although strangely only 2 of the plants seem to be spiking this year, but next year I guess they'll do well. Okay, so now we're going to try and do a full pan around. There's that little shady path that we'll have a look down, but there's not a lot going on now. Moving around, we have, oh goodness, foxgloves, lots and lots of foxgloves. We have my alliums, which I planted last autumn and are now coming into flower. The stone table where I sat last night and took a lot of photographs, and then just scooching around here, don't mind the trug there, That white blob is a Campanula, and here we have the greenhouse border just hidden behind my pine tree. And for the last scooch around, cherry blossom tree over there, utilities area, and back here again. And before we leave, I just want to mention how the house is cunningly hidden behind this tree. And the greenhouse border is really kind of big and leafy at the moment. Everything filled out nicely. On the left there, that Euphorbia, which is the big dense clump with fading orange flowers at the top of it, has filled out a bit too nicely, so I'm going to have to do a job on that and pull a lot of it out because it really is a bit of a thug. And then over on the right hand side we have two things. The Diplarrena is looking really well, and you can see how dainty those little flowers are. Very pretty. And right beside it we have Melanoselinum in full flower. Now this is a monocarpic plant from Madeira Island which dies after it flowers, but it seeds about readily, and so you know you're never going to lose it, and the bees absolutely love it. Can you see how it's a wash with them? And to the right of the greenhouse is that tree stump that you saw me make last year and plant Clematis up, and we have a Clematis in flower. And there's just one on this Clematis this year, but I'm sure it'll get going next year. I just need to tie the plant in a little bit better now to make sure it's covering the base of the tree rather than going straight up and leaving the bare bit down below. Oh, the white Clematis on the other side did flower already, and I took a little snip for you, so that's what you're looking at now. It's not in bloom now, but it was a little while ago. And down from the cherry tree we have one of my two Cornus kousa, and this one is a pink variety that I complained never made the really big pink flowers I had bought it for in the first place. So I moved it, and like 2 years later what we find is that the flowers are certainly very pretty. They're coming on very pink, and they are bigger than they were in its previous position. I think it wasn't getting enough, there wasn't enough soil underneath it. It was very much up against the tarmac, so it just couldn't get what it needed. So I think this might go on to make bigger flowers in the years that come and prove to me that it was worth the money. And I don't know if I've shown you my other Cornus kousa tree before, but this is a well-established one that I've had for a few years. Now this isn't a cultivar, it is just Cornus kousa, Chinese dogwood. Some years are better than others for flowering, but this year is quite a good year. And this is a super small tree that has glorious autumn colour, so it has 2 seasons of interest, which is always a bonus. Now of course we call these flowers, but I think actually technically they're bracts. It doesn't matter either which way. They're beautiful things. And if memory serves, this plant also gets berries in autumn. Some of the Cornus kousa do and some don't, and this being just the species, I think it does get the berries, but it's not really a very spectacular display because berries really need to be held, lots of them, pendulously on branches for them to make an impact in autumn. If you have a few berries dotted around, it really doesn't make much of a show. Okay, time to head over there where the white Campanula is beckoning, and that's one of the reasons why I really like white in a garden. It really jumps out. And this Campanula is one of my favourite plants. I really like where it's planted here against the dark leaf on the right. of the contorted hazel. It's the dark version of the contorted hazel, and it really shows out the white very well. But what I love about this is that it flowers for a really, really long time if you keep deadheading it. And taking a look here at the stone table, I guess what really jumps out is the alliums in front, and these are beautiful alliums that I planted just last autumn. Now over here the alliums are planted in among the Alstroemeria, and I was a little bit afraid that they wouldn't be tall enough to rise above the Alstroemeria and therefore get lost, but they're doing it. Whether it's that they're reaching for the light, so they've gone a bit taller than they would normally. In any case, it's a really great thing. That green mass down below is Alstroemeria, and if you look closely you can see that the buds are coming, so that's going to be a mass of orange very soon, and I hope it will be when the alliums are here, because the orange and purple together would look super. But even if it doesn't flower at the same time as the alliums, at least I've given this patch interest before the orange Alstroemeria comes into play. And this is Allium christophii, my absolute favourite allium. There are others that look more spectacular, but they tend to disappear over time in my garden. And what I love about this one is that it looks spectacular. It will open more fully than this, making a complete ball that will be purple, and then after the purple fades I will be left with a skeleton, which is good in its own right and just adds architecture to the border for the longest time. Around about the end of summer they will start to brown, and then I will need to remove them, but until then they really prove their worth. So this is a great allium to look out for and to buy if you can hide their leaves, because you can't cut off the leaves, but they're not very pretty. So if you can plant them somewhere where you don't necessarily see the leaves, all the better. And each of these balls produces a mass of tiny little star flowers, a beautiful sight, with a vague scent of onion, because these are of course in the onion family. Okay, next up we are going to travel down this little path, and it's chiefly to see the riotously colourful plants just there on the right. And in front of me is my biggest hosta, that's Empress Wu, the big green thing over there, a fantastic one that gets really big. And just to its right we have a riot of colour. Oh, I love my riots of colour. This is gardening for me, this kind of mad mix of all kinds of everything. And we have orange and we have a deep purple, and we look at the deep purple daisy flowers first. So this is a chrysanthemum that I raised from seed very many years ago, and it's a species chrysanthemum, and all of the flowers turn out the same colour, which is just wonderful, because I hate things dotted in that are different colours, hate my yellows with my pinks. This guy here is a lovely thing, and yeah, what can I say? Oh, it used to have a different name. It didn't used to be chrysanthemum. It had another longer name beginning with P that I don't remember. But I love this, and I look forward to them flowering every year. Just two downsides, well I suppose three. I mean, it flowers once and that's it. But you know what? You need to have stuff like that in the garden. You can't have everything that, I mean, there's very few things that just flower the whole summer long, unless they're bedding that die over winter. And I suppose this one needs staking, so you can see down here the hoops that are in place. If you don't stake it, it'll flop. Maybe if it's in full sun it won't flop, but mine is in partial shade. Oh, and the rabbits love it. If you've any rabbits, and we do get the occasional rabbit in here, this is one of the first things that they munch on. Beside it we have one of my favourite Alstroemeria. This one's called Verona, I think. and I love the flowers. This also needs a little bit of staking, although I think I've gotten away with it this year. We'll see. A beautiful thing with soft colours. The other Alstroemeria that isn't quite open yet has more harsh colours, but this is kind of like soft orangey pink, and it's great. And the great thing about Alstroemeria for people like me who live in the temperate zone is that it looks like an exotic plant. Even the name Peruvian lily makes you think exotic plant, but it's perfectly hardy. For me anyway. We're just beyond the path now, and you can see a bunch of things, but in the middle is a very, very tall Verbascum. And look at it with its yellow spire, partially yellow spire anyway. And I just love the silver ones with the silver foliage. I have a lot of green ones in the garden, which I keep trying to remove because the silver one is the one I want to predominate. And over here by the stone table, you can see how the planting has really come on in leaps and bounds. And for those of you who are wondering about succession planting with the tulips, you can see in this spot, you really can't see where they were at all anymore. And over here, also at the stone table, we have some hostas. This is between the two Trachycarpus trees, and in here it is quite dark. And we have some white foxgloves, but I'll show you those in just a moment. Behind the foxgloves is the large Regersea that we moved in spring, and you can tell that it hasn't bothered it at all. And just swinging around to this long border that leads from the stone table down the garden, you can see foxgloves, lots and lots of foxgloves. And June really is the month when foxgloves sing and make you so glad that you sowed them and have them. This is a variety of foxglove called Pam's Choice. It's white and it has these deep red throats. And the throats are variable, as you can see. This one has a particularly mottled feel about it, whereas in the previous one the colour was more dense. In any case, they look fantastic, and I really like the white ones. I suppose because the pink ones are very common around here. They just pop up in the hedgerows and even in my garden. So the white one is a bit more exotic, and I really think it is a lot more beautiful than the white one, but there are different varieties you can buy. My personal favourite is Pam's Choice, named after a lady who found it in Oregon, and we'll learn more about that in a video that's coming your way very soon. You can see that I've planted the foxglove together with the white Artemisia there at the front, silver Artemisia. I think the colours complement each other very well. There's a purple persicaria just there on the left, which I believe brings out the interior of the foxgloves, and little white pansies down below. And okay, I'm very pleased with this planting. Also the white Campanula there at the back. I think it's more refined than what I might normally do in my garden, whereas I normally like pinks and oranges together in a riot of colour with a bit of blue thrown in there as well, but this is much more calming. I guess this is a border of two halves in many ways, because we have that white restfulness up there, but down here in the border it's doing something quite different. And you can see that one of my final rhododendrons is in bloom just over there. I thought I was going to miss it because I was on my holidays, so I'm delighted to see that I didn't. And oh yeah, is it a rhododendron or is it an azalea? Can you remember how to tell? Yes, it's got 10 stamens, so it's a rhododendron. Although of course there is only one genus nowadays. At the back here we have a couple of trees, I suppose, bushes, trees. Let's just pan up, and on the right we get to the top. This one has been clipped into a kind of lollipop shape, and this is Luma Glanleam Gold, a myrtle that's named after a garden in Kerry where it was first discovered. Its advantage is the variegated foliage. And then we move a bit further down past the load of Lobelia tupa that will soon be in bloom, to my Kalmia and a little penstemon there at the front. And here you can see the penstemon a little bit better, but before we have a look at it, and it really has a most electric colour, let's have a look at the Kalmia. Now, Kalmia is a beautiful bush that likes similar conditions to rhododendrons, so it's one for acid soil. But I love the pinwheel flowers that are really quite unusual. It's much rarer, well, in Ireland anyway, than rhododendrons are. And here we have the penstemon at the front with its electric colours. When the sun hits it, it really is fantastic. It's a kind of violet blue, but there's pink in there too. And I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a general buzzing of bees all around here. I'm not sure what they're busy with, but it's some flower or other. I've just moved a step back now to give you a broader view of this border. So that's the penstemon down there on the left, Kalmia in front, which is just opening. Moving a bit further up, we have a very tall perennial with yellow flowers. The tree on the left is a pear tree. I wish I had never planted it, but if we go further up, there's a rose in there. Okay, so this is a climbing rose that now has a lethal trunk that I planted up the pear tree. I grew it from seed many years ago, and it has really quite electric pink flowers, which is great, except it tends to be favouring the backside of the pear tree, so my neighbours see it better than I do. Oh yeah, it's got a strange name. It's called Rosa geranium. I have no idea why it would be named after a different plant. Rosa geranium. Oh yeah, there's a hydrangea in there, a big hydrangea. Past the pear tree, there are two pear trees. Double mistake. And in here it's quite quiet and calm, and that's good. I removed a number of the lower branches of the pear tree just recently. I now have a lot more light between those two trees. There's that rhododendron, Percy, the wise man that looked fabulous a little while ago, and behind it we have a number of lilies which were getting no light and are bending out towards us, but I think we'll see them so much better now. And over here in the corner we have, well, there's that acacia, the variegated acacia down there on the left. And this really has bulked up rather well. Lithyrum aurea, the orange one there on the right, which is just setting seed. So we've talked our way down the left-hand side of this path here, but we haven't discussed anything there on the right, and I will just briefly mention it. Iris, looking fabulous there on the right. This is a Pacific Coast iris that has done really well, an enormous clump now. And yeah, I thought it was getting so big that it wouldn't flower so well anymore, but that's still doing well. We have volunteer self-sown poppies at the front of the border that are proving a bit of a thug because they've grown so high. Perhaps because it's a shady border, they're reaching for the light, and you can see that they are just red, but the bees seem to be enjoying them, so at least that's a good thing. And also in this border we have the bush Calicanthes, which isn't quite open but has beautiful flowers when it does open, and we'll come back and see them a bit later on. Oh, and remember that persicaria that was burnt by a late frost? Well, it doesn't seem to have bothered it too much. Okay, so we're going to leave all that section behind and just move a bit over here. You can see my Easter Island head has been put in here. And this border is, well, there's a lot going on. This hardy geranium here at the front is really, really tall, and unfortunately this year it's obscuring the peonies, which these are peonies which are in full flower now, but it's hard to see, but we'll just sneak in here at the back. So these are intersectional Ito hybrids, and this one is called Bartzella, a beautiful, beautiful yellow peony that is self-supporting because it has some of the woodiness of tree peonies, and that means it doesn't need hoops, which is a definite bonus. And over here, doing even better, is one called Garden Treasure, also yellow, and it has a lot of flowers. Now, if I'd had a bit more time, if I hadn't been away on holiday, I would have neatened up this border a bit so we could see the peonies a bit better. But I didn't. I wasn't, so I didn't. So we'll just have to make do. This one has 5 blooms this year, so a spectacular flowering. Yeah, that one is Garden Treasure. And here we are in the border where I moved the Sarracenia planters last year. Gosh, it feels like a long time ago now, and they're doing really well. And can you see that bush just there with the pink flowers? Let's have a look at that. And this is a Dutzia. Forgive me if I don't pronounce this the same way everybody else does, but yeah. Strawberry Fields, I think it's called. A really beautiful flower. But let me show you my final Ito hybrid peony, intersectional peony. And this is one I bought recently, and I am bitterly disappointed because it's not orange, it's more yellow. Now this flower is fading, but it's definitely yellow, and I wanted an orange one. And Kasky seems to be enjoying herself in there in the border. She seems to be nibbling on my Anemone blanda leaves. I guess she could do worse. And now just moving a bit further down the garden, you can see the site that greeted me on my return, those blue irises in full flower in front of the heucheras, and a lot of promise in this border. And for the Clematis fans out there among you, I know there are many, this one is doing well now in flower on one of my arches. And plenty more flowers to come. And swinging past the Sambucus in full flower and moving down to the rhododendrons. So this is my long border, and there's a glorious geranium there at the front. This is the shady section, looking really quite shady. A nice mess of different leaves going on in there. Behind the geranium we have some peonies, some aconite, and some lilies. And these are the lilies that I planted last year. Okay, we'll see them down the other end where it's sunnier in a minute. They didn't get very tall the first year, but now the second year they're tall like they're supposed to be, and I can't wait for them to flower. And just further down the border, let's have a look at those lilies. Okay, so this border is going to look gorgeous in a couple of weeks' time when the dahlias start flowering, when that second geranium starts flowering, and a couple of other things really pick up and get going. And yeah, I've shown it to you a couple of times before. You'll recall that I planted it up not very long ago, but what I've been doing this year is revamping this section down here. So this section of the border had become dominated by the Euphorbia there at the back. You can see there's a white abutilon there on the right, looking floriferous at the moment and really quite good. But to the left we have a red-leafed shrub that's also in flower, but I don't know, it's very leggy. I think perhaps it doesn't have enough space, and I'm definitely thinking of getting rid of it. But the real monster in this whole section is Euphorbia mellifera, which had seeded about, I think there were about 5 different bushes, not just this one enormous one. And before we went to Kerry, I spent some time digging them out. So I've removed those extra Euphorbia bushes, although I see one there that I missed. I just cut back the big one, and now I have a lot of space, and there is a big leafed rhododendron I want to put in there, so I'm going to enjoy planting that up. At the front here there's also a space where I had some delphiniums a few years ago, and I'm going to enjoy putting something in there. And just over here we have the astrantia, looking really great at the moment. This is an enormous clump of astrantia that I grew from seed many years ago, and it's really big and I guess needs a divide. But the flowers are really good when it's in flower. Super thing, very easy plant. And just to the right of it is where that fatsia was that I got rid of, well, tried to get rid of last year, and we eventually managed to get rid of it this spring. In the end we had to put weed killer on it, and over time that loosened the roots. And in spring I planted these tree lilies in its spot. Now they have grown, but they're not looking as big as they will do, and that's because they've just been transplanted. But hopefully when we come back next year we'll have a 5-foot clump of these lilies right here. Okay, so I have lots of work to be getting on with in this border. And today is a lovely day for it. But just before we round up this garden tour, I want to bring you over to the other side of the garden. And now we're going to venture into this section of the garden. I had to show you this mad little corner where I have geums and I have an iris I recently moved and is flowering, and I have snapdragons. And this is a beautiful snapdragon called Madam Butterfly that I raised from seed and came through last winter, and I hope it will go on to flower for many years. And here we have sanguisorba mixed together with a different type of allium. This one doesn't present with a purple ball, but more drooping flowers. And over here from the snapdragons, we have a lot of nepeta, delphiniums, and the mock orange is just coming into flower behind. And that brings me to the end of this garden tour, which I hope you enjoyed. I do hope you're enjoying your own garden, because this is what it's all about in the end, isn't it? We need to appreciate what's right there in front of our nose. Yeah, we need to work on making it better and extra things we can add, but it's down to enjoyment and the sense of fulfillment that gardening gives to our souls. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.